Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 9th of February 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Girish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. The weather. Well, we've got reports of sunshine. I think the sun has got his hat on, apparently, in northwest Surrey. Norfolk is also sunny. We're going to stop there because the rest is too gruesome. Well, what's going on of importance? Of course, Syria doesn't go away at all and is being used to cover up other news of great importance in UK.
Yes, BBC up to their old tricks because they would always be completely impartial, wouldn't they, with regard to Syria? So here we are, a nice impartial photograph there to show what this is about. Syria is exterminating detainees, according to a UN report, according to the BBC. And they say, the study says both loyalist and anti-government forces have committed possible war crimes. So unbelievably enough, the BBC is perhaps the better of the two articles that we're going to mention on this particular subject. Nonetheless, what do? They say many detainees were tortured, some beaten to death, others died from lack of food, water, or medical care. The findings come from interviews with hundreds of witnesses and cover the period since the start of the anti-government protests in March 2011. The report says thousands of detainees have been killed while in the custody of warring parties during that time. But then the report goes on to quote carefully selected paragraphs. The BBC report goes on to quote carefully selected paragraphs from the United Nations report. And they display unbelievable bias because the paragraphs that they quote are particularly carefully chosen. But The Guardian is even worse. To quote from this article, they say, through mass arrest and killing of civilians, including by starvation and untreated wounds and disease, state forces have engaged in the multiple commissions of crimes amounting to a systematic and widespread attack against a civilian population. And this paragraph from this article is the first couple of clauses in that sentence are summaries of what the report has said, and then the second half of that sentence is a direct quote. Nonetheless, the overall impression is that paragraph is a direct quote from the United Nations report. It's a downright lie because the report doesn't use the word starvation anywhere. That word is not to be found. Untreated wounds, they're not to be found in the report. Neither is the word disease. So this is complete propaganda from both the BBC and the Guardian. So let's look at what the report does say. So it says, in the Syrian Arab Republic, massive and systemized violence, including the killing of detainees in official and makeshift detention centers, has taken place out of sight, far from the battlefield. This paper examines the killing of detainees occurring between 2011 and 2015. Its findings are based on 621 interviews, as well as considerable documentary evidence. It says detainees held by the government were beaten to death or died as a result of injuries sustained due to torture. Others perished as a consequence of inhuman living conditions. The government has committed the crimes against humanity of extermination, murder, rape, or other forms of sexual violence, torture, imprisonment, enforced disappearance, and other inhuman acts. Based on the same conduct, war crimes have also been committed. Now, of course, this in itself is a bit of propaganda because they say the government has committed. Well, the government hasn't committed. Individuals have committed acts. And in a war zone, while the government must bear responsibility, at the end of the day, they didn't commit the rape personally. They didn't commit the murder or the torture personally. But we'll come on to that in a second. Then it goes on to say, some anti-government armed groups established makeshift places of detention where captured government soldiers were ill-treated and executed. Others were summarily executed following illicit trials. Some individuals taken hostage have died while held by armed groups. They say Jabhat al-Nusra has set up detention facilities in Idlib where deaths in detention were documented. The terrorist group also conducted mass executions of captured government soldiers. Both Jabhat al-Nusra and some anti-government armed forces have committed the war crimes of murder, cruel treatment, and torture. ISIS subjected detainees to serious abuses, including torture and summary executions. Detainees were frequently executed after unauthorized courts issued a death sentence. ISIS has committed the crimes against humanity of murder and torture and war crimes. And then they finally say accountability for these and other crimes must form part of any political solution. The situation of detainees is critical and represents an urgent and large-scale crisis of human rights protection. Urgent steps must be taken by the Syrian government, armed groups, external backers, and the wider international community to prevent further deaths. So, Syria is a war zone. I'm quite sure there are atrocities going on. The report has a section on torture, and the hypocrisy, once again, is staggering because, Brian, after all, Britain would never get involved in torture.
Well, we did. Let's
that's what this.
Let's come to the heart of the matter.
Yes.
The British government absolutely did get involved in torture and then lying to cover up that torture.
Right, and the United Nations report has a section on extrajudicial killings, but Britain would never get involved in extrajudicial killings either, would they?
Yes,
yes,
they would.
Okay, so basically two levels of propaganda going on here. There's the level of propaganda within the UN report itself, although it is by far more balanced than either of the media reports that we highlighted there. The BBC and The Guardian should really be utterly ashamed of themselves for what they've attempted to do here.
I doubt whether that's the case, Mike, because I believe both of them will be doing it in order to assist the government agenda, certainly the BBC. But the hypocrisy with what the British government has done, and we've of course seen those reports of rendition flights and British Secret Service agents being present when people were waterboarded and tortured. So it's not okay if any other overseas countries carry out this sort of behaviour, but if Britain is doing it and lying about it, then it's fine.
So it seems.
So it seems, yeah.
Okay, and also Syria. What have we got here? Turkey and Saudi Arabia planning to get together and invade Syria. Why? Well, there's a certain amount of desperation in this because their team terrorists are losing. So they're going to take some direct action. 21st Century Wire highlighting this as well. Turkey hyping up this new influx of 600,000 refugees north of Aleppo. That's the excuse that Turkey is using for the need to invade. Do have a look at this report on 21st Century Wire. And the Foreign Office getting into panic mode as well. Oh my goodness, our team terrorists are losing is what they're saying. Stop it, Russia, please, is basically what's going on here.
Well, it's just incredible. They were attacking Russia, and Russia was the bad man at every step. And now all of a sudden, well, we just need a bit of your help because, as you say, it's all coming unravelled.
All coming unravelled.
Yeah.
But this was an interesting article in Express. The Telegraph had it as well. What have we got here? 1,600 troops, apparently with 300 armoured vehicles on their way to Jordan to take part in exercise Shamal Storm. They're saying that it could be a dry run for having to send a large armoured force of up to 30,000 British troops to Eastern Europe. I'd like to know where they're going to get them from.
Well, 30,000 troops would effectively be full combat strength of the British Army. This is the situation we're in, Mike. So this is complete nonsense. The force here is a small exercise force which isn't going to fool anybody. And to say you're going to put 30,000 British troops on the ground full time is, I would suggest at the moment, not doable,
right? Well,
because of the state of the British Army.
And indeed, some of the comment in the Telegraph article was saying exactly that. We can't send a division to support the United States like we did in Iraq in 2003.
Because David Cameron has absolutely slaughtered the British Armed Forces, including the Army.
Right.
And we were told yesterday, if I may, that a French general would be standing in as the commander of a British division while the British officer was on leave. We haven't had that substantiated yet, but we think that's correct.
No, that is
that was correct.
Was a brigadier general.
Right. So there we are. We don't actually have a British army anymore, thanks to David Cameron, because what he's been doing is working in the European army in the background.
Now, also commented by the Telegraph on this same subject was they didn't name the source, but the source said that this isn't a counter-ISIL exercise. This is exercise Shamal Storm. If anything, this is much more about us preparing to join the US in Ukraine than it is in Syria. So we did suggest some time ago that the agenda would move to Ukraine, and perhaps they are preparing for exactly that.
But Mike, isn't it interesting how this unfolds? Because what we don't see is a full and proper debate in Westminster over the situation, whether it's in Ukraine or what's happening in the Middle East, and then a decision is taken on whether British forces are going to be employed. What we see is an arbitrary decision behind the scenes by who? David Cameron, who made the decision that troops were to be moved. And of course, you don't hear comment from any other MP. So we've just got President Cameron making a decree behind closed doors, and then the press simply stand back and react to it. It's astonishing, really.
They don't even react in the correct way. They just stand back and accept it, and even promote it.
And promote it, yeah. Well, of course. Are you finished there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as that unfolds, what are we being fed closer to home, as it were? Well, immigration, Cameron knows, is a hot topic at the moment. He's trying to jump on the anti-immigration bandwagon because he thinks this will assist his EU referendum vote. So we've got headlines like this coming up. Now, he said that basically if we left the EU, then France is going to withdraw its support for looking after the refugees in Calais in particular. So the main part of it was the Prime Minister accused of scaremongering yesterday when he said leaving the EU would lead to the deal being scrapped, i.e. the French taking the stance they were on the migrant camps in Calais. And the refugee and migrant camps in Calais would relocate southern England as a result. So that was Cameron's scaremongering. But what I found very interesting in this article is that the Independent relied heavily on this gentleman to comment. He's Sir Peter Ricketts, former National Security Advisor, and he said if the context changed and Britain made a major decision to leave the EU, I think it's highly likely France would review its position too. So he was saying, well, the French could go either way because there's a lot of people picking at it. But who is this man? Well, of course, if we delve into this gentleman, he's the man busy giving evidence to the Iraq inquiry in February 2010. And I'll just read you this. In the economic area, BP signed a deal with the Iraq Oil Company for a £27 billion 20-year project in the south. In the security area, we have had another very bad suicide bombing yesterday, but the overall trend of security incidents is down. So I think that on all the indicators, progress is being made. So what I'm trying to get at here is this man's opinion is what? There's no substance to it.
Worthless.
Worthless. He thinks that in a war-torn country like Iraq, the fact that BP's been able to secure a £27 billion 20-year oil deal means things are improving. What does this man know about anything? And Independent simply takes his viewpoint as if it's gospel truth.
But he's an expert.
I'm getting cynical.
Well, perhaps this is a good reason to get cynical, because the Daily Mail really is, what's the word? Split personality, isn't it? The day before this is today's headline, the front page. The day before, yesterday, they were absolutely jumping on the whole migrant camps in the south of England thing, and they had absolutely scaremongering headlines. And today, Cameron is a scaremonger. And even if you look at this front page, the top half is all about fear. Britain hit by rage of Imogen. We've all got to be scared of the weather. And
it's like looking at a film advert, isn't it? Is this reality? Is this some form of concocted American film? You know,
it's so the front page itself, absolute. It's crazy. It's like, what can you say?
What can we say?
Right. Just want to remind everybody about Robert Stewart's talk at Frome on the 1st of March. This is on Saving Syria's Children, the BBC Panorama documentary, which he and we agree had many irregularities about it. And so that starts at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 1st of March. If you're able to get along to that, please do. Details on the link on the right-hand side on Facebook.
Okay. Well, I think quite a few people picked up on our analysis of what was going on in mental health, and particularly mental health around the MAPA organisation across UK. Before we get into that, though, on the subject of mental health, this is another dark image from the Mail. This is Adam Osborne, George Osborne's psychiatrist brother, who's had another inappropriate sexual relationship with a vulnerable patient. But if you get into this article, it isn't just that. In 2010, he was suspended for writing fraudulent prescriptions for a girlfriend, a family member, and an escort girl. And now he's admitted having sex with a vulnerable patient under his care. He sent inappropriate emails, basically trying to intimidate the patient, it would seem, in that if you don't withdraw your complaint. We just asked, why has this man not been struck off? Is it because George Osborne is his powerful brother and he can pull strings in high places? But the other bit to remember is this could be the very psychiatrist used to section you as part of the MAPA organisation after allegations out of nowhere have been made by your local council. So if you want to highlight the dangers of the psychiatric movement being used politically, George Osborne's brother seems to be right in the bracket, and they're prepared to let a man like this practice as if he's got some morality and honour, I think is the word. Well, thank you very much to Linda, who sent this email. I know it's a bit difficult to read. She says she's been watching people hailing Jeremy Corbyn as the saviour of Britain, and it worries me. It's a time of misery for so many people, having Tory policy forced on them for so many years. Then along comes Corbyn. He could be a dad. I fear this is about the time when the people in Germany voted in their choice for a new leader after being ground down by unemployment, poverty and sickness. And look what happened. I know political parties all work towards the same agenda, but so many people still can't see it. If Corbyn is elected, the people will be so starstruck for change, they will barely notice the black vans on their streets. All the plans are in place to see us all carted off as useless eaters, and it just takes a man with a trustworthy face to implement the plans. Step up, Corbyn. My mum once asked my German uncle's parents, her sister married a German, if they knew what Hitler was planning. She's subtle like that, and they said they had no idea. I think Corbyn is the pacifier handed out to the disgruntled people. Everything is stage managed. So we're not quite sure whether that opinion is true, but we take the point that at the moment despicable things happening in this country. But this was the link that we picked up on in this email, and it took us down a fascinating route. So this is restricting the use of police cells for those experiencing a mental health crisis, news stories, gov.uk. Well, this is the web page, and if you get into this, it says banning the use of police cells as a place of safety for under 18s and ensuring they're only used for adults in exceptional circumstances. That's the pacifier headline, and it says the Home Office is going to take this. The government has been clear that police cells are a poor environment for any person experiencing a mental health crisis. They can make service users feel criminalised and exacerbate levels of distress. This is the British government, trust us, we're looking after you. Well, are they? When you get deeper into this, you find they're going to make changes to the Mental Health Act under the forthcoming Police and Crime Bill. So I'm going to say we've got mental health changes being hidden under the title of policing and crime. So we've got banning police cells as a place of safety for under 18s. That's the bit that sounds okay. But when you read into this, you see other things. Widening the current definition of a place of safety to increase local capacity and flexibility. What does that mean, Mike? Being held in a local authority?
Quite possibly.
We've got this one. Extending police officers' powers to act quickly to detain and remove people experiencing a mental health crisis from any place other than a private dwelling. And then it tries to reassure you for which a warrant would still be required. But then we go down to the last one. clarifying that assessments under the Act can take place in a private dwelling.
Does that mean that they can break your door down in order to assess you?
Assess you and section you or take you for assessment under MAPA. That's exactly what I think this is doing, Mike. This is about bringing mental health into your home. Well, that website led on to this, and you quite rightly picked up just before the programme, the Crisis Care Concordat. And I think this organisation is just amazing. You will see that a national agreement has been reached between a whole variety of service agencies to support people in crisis. So it's being sold as if this is something nice to look after people. But when you get into it, it is just astonishing, because these are some of the existing signatories to this Concordat. Everybody is suddenly involved in mental health. Department of Health, that's fine. Social work, maybe. Education, local government, charities, Ministry of Defence, National Police Chiefs Council, public health, NHS providers. On it goes. And of course, the bit that is extremely dangerous is in comes the charity and third sector, as if these are formal government bodies. So we've got some of the main ones. Rethink we're going to be mentioning in a minute, Stonewall, Turning Point, Young Minds, all of these being linked together in order to provide a network which can simply pick people up and section them. So we should be able to show a list here. Let's see whether this is going to play. We should be able to scroll down here. I think it will work. Here we go. Just look at the organisations and documents which are now all clustered around our mental health. These people saying, trust us, we've got your best interests at heart. But have they really? It's astonishing, Mike. This list is astonishing.
Is David Cameron qualified to assess my mental health?
Absolutely not. And but of course, under the MAPA arrangements, it doesn't matter, because if he was to make an accusation against you, or one of your local authority people, or a local community police officer, unqualified people make an accusation with no evidence, along comes the team to assess whether you're a risk to society, the state, etc. So that
makes me feel safe.
It should do, Mike.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we'll just let this run through, because the list, as I say, is astonishing. Yeah, it will come to a halt very shortly. I haven't counted out the exact number on here, but here's the title to placate you: urgent and emergency access to care. This is all about caring for people, quality of care. And on the documents go, and of course none of this debated in Parliament, none of this brought forward to the public, but this huge network being knitted together behind our backs. Okay, well, let's put some of this together in another form. Yesterday we reported on the Liverpool local area MAPA and MASH cells, and the key point of this was that it was all around local agency. Well, while the local cells are going on, of course, we've also got this national mental health network. So here was Liverpool, multi-agency safeguarding hub MASH, which is part of the multi-agency public protection arrangement, supposedly to protect us, but in fact providing a sectioning net. These are all the people networked in the Liverpool area and each of the other some 63 areas across the country: police, NHS, care commissioning groups in the NHS, national probation, community services, rehabilitation and housing. And the other thing we warned about was this was all data-based through a database system, which also linked into private healthcare and IT companies. Well, now what we've got is clear evidence that this is being pushed out on a national scale. And the mental health concordat, we've just seen the scale of that. Those all linked into the 27 national signatories. And let us also remember that we've still got the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre, which is the police working directly with psychiatrists in order to protect the great and good, politicians, pop stars. This is the woman at the heart of it all, Theresa May, unbelievably dangerous. And remember that we are now at the point that you're deemed mentally unwell if you challenge the government. So this is in front of us, but Huffington Post here picking up on the fact that we've got more being pumped out by the Labour Party in particular. The next generation shouldn't have to cope on their own. It's time for ministers to act. This is all about the mental health of youngsters. And the article was put together by Lucy Powell MP, Shadow Secretary of State for Education, and her teammate Luciana Berger, Shadow Minister for Mental Health. Not sure what her experience is for mental health, but can't find out a lot about her background. But these two women say that 1 in 10 children now has a diagnosable mental health condition, around 3 children in every classroom. An estimate suggests that the cost of mental health problems to the country is now close to 105 billion a year. So we're being led to believe that children are significantly mentally ill. But if we have a look at Luciana Berger's Twitter page, that statistic of 1 in 10 has now miraculously changed to 20% of children have a mental health problem. Now, I actually spoke to one of the mental health charities before we came on air and asked them which statistic they were using. They said 1 in 10, but that is quite old. It was put together in 2004. So
they're saying that in 10 years, the number of children with mental health problems has doubled? Is that what is
No, they don't want to
suggested here?
say that, because when you ask them the question about the reliability of the statistics and what they're doing, they got pretty cagey about that. So following this lady through a bit more, what has Ms. Berger been up to? Well, she's backing Time for Change, which is to get more mental health help in amongst children. And what sort of people are getting involved? Well, we've got the Duchess of Cambridge launching Children's Mental Health Week. And I'd just like to say against this that we can see the stress on our children with the tests, the exams, the changes to the type of education they get, political correctness. We've got prevent anti-terrorism education and some pretty vile sexualisation of our children. Seems to me that it's our politicians that are causing the mental health problems in the first place. And we can add a bit more to that, because here we've got this is Liverpool CAMHS Mental Health. They're also promoting this Time for Change initiative. And where do we find this? Well, this is part of the website, Time to Change, and they're selecting leaders amongst school children to be trained in dealing with mental health issues. How does that work, Mike? You've got young people, they've got enough problems with their own life, getting through school, getting used to themselves, growing up. Now they're being made mental health experts, and they're going to be working amongst their school colleagues. Well, if you follow this website through, this gets pretty interesting as well, because this is promoting another load of agencies all working around mental health with young people. And I asked the question, just who are these youngsters? Sorry, who are these organisations, and why should we let them get in amongst our young people? Alder Hey Hospital, some very interesting stories about Alder Hey and experiments on children in the psychiatric department, but apparently we should trust them. And as with the other one, On It Goes. On It Goes. Spinning World, pretty interesting title, that one. Action Youth ADHD Foundation, Beacon Counselling Trust, Disability and Inclusion Team. Clearly, young people are not the same. They've all got problems. So if we come back to what this organisation is about, well, here it is, a little bit of NLP, Liverpool FYI. For your information, it means Fun Youth Involvement. This is mental health, Mike. Fun, youth involvement. It's a group of young people to help to shape and inform Liverpool child and adolescent mental health services. So we're taking young school children, basically, and they are going to be trained in mental health.
Excellent.
I just pause here because it comes to the point where you do not know what to say. It is so obvious what's going on.
Well, perhaps somebody that needs some mental health help himself is Mr. Farron, because he has and his organisation have published, although his name is against it, have published a report saying that the average home price in Britain by 2032 is going to be £1 million or more. And this is research by the Liberal Democrats, and they are basing this assessment, this push out into the future, on the last 3 years of house price rises.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty good foundation for those houses.
Good foundation, so that's excellent. So they're projecting out 20 years based on the last 3. So this is what he had to say. A child born on the day of the debate faces the prospect of paying at least £1 million for a home to call their own. Relying on the bank of mum and dad isn't an option for everyone, and adds pressure to millions of families who have worked hard and done the right thing. The continuing upward spiral of house prices threatens the very idea of a family home. I just thought I'd quote a couple of the comments at the bottom of the Telegraph article, which were quite interesting. One said, "Completely meaningless unless they're also going to say what average wages are likely to be. Another dumb headline based on a dumb piece of research from a dumb party. If average annual income is by then is £450,000, then an average house price of 1.017 million is no problem. If average annual income by then is £50,000, then an average house price of 1.017 million is a disaster. Anyway, how did this piece of research come to that figure? Just a ruler and a straight line. Idiots." That sums it up pretty well. And another comment said, of course, the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party forgot to mention his house is worth more than £1 million already. He doesn't have to wait until 2032.
Well, of course not.
No.
But they can't manage a study into the safety of children in the care system. They can do houses, but they can't manage to see who's abusing the children.
Well, if they ran a study on who's abusing the children and used the same type of people to run that study, it would be worthless anyway, wouldn't it? But let's talk a bit more finance. So Deutsche Bank, we mentioned them a few days ago because, of course, they're in real trouble at the moment and stock prices going through the floor. Well, it seems they're pretty close to panic themselves because they felt the need to make a public statement about the situation. And that statement is that everything's all right, it's all okay, honest gov. What they said was the 2016 payment capacity is estimated to be approximately €1 billion, sufficient to pay so-called Tier 1 coupons of approximately €350 million on April the 30th, the statement said. Well, some people have noticed that, or made note of the fact that the decision to issue such a statement is highly unusual. So they're clearly panicking about what's being recognised about their situation.
We could ask Julia Middleton, Chief Executive of Common Purpose, of course, what she thinks of the Deutsche Bank situation at the moment, since that's one of the loved banks of the charity. Lehman Brothers, I think, was another one. They're doing well.
Yes. Anyway, okay. Let's get back to George Osborne. A number of different newspapers today pointing out that petrol prices are likely to go up because, of course, Georgie Boy has been unable to meet any of his targets with regard to the so-called government deficit. The Telegraph here suggesting that he has to fill a £3 billion hole in the country's finances by 2020. And this is according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies. And of course, petrol is an easy target for this because with oil prices collapsing as they are, but people having had recent memory of paying £1.30 or whatever for a litre of fuel, then sticking an extra 20p on a litre of fuel is probably something that he feels he can get away with, maybe. Okay, Goldman Sachs. Well, they're saying, according to Ambrose Evans Pritchard, that the UK has a near zero risk of another recession. So a number of people today really pointing out well, I'll just say what they said first. It says Britain is extremely unlikely to face an economic recession over the next 2 years and is on safer ground than any other major country in the developed world. And Pritchard, at the end of his article, said, for those, quotes, brave enough to defy the Goldman Sachs, the prognosis of the markets, that is, this may be an ideal time to jump back into the stock market, said Goldman Sachs. And Pritchard saying brave is certainly the word. Well, I think Goldman Sachs has pretty much got everything wrong in the last couple of years. So if they're saying that we've got zero risk of a recession, we're pretty likely to be in one pretty quickly.
It's quite interesting that might see that the major banks are all coming out with different stories at the moment, which suggest panic, because there obviously isn't a common line at the top they should all be following.
I think this is the theme of today's news. The government is panicking because Russia is defeating its tame terrorists in Syria. The banks are panicking because they haven't got a clue what's going on. Everybody's panicking really at the moment.
Which is good news for people who are trying to get the truth out as to what is really going on. Stay calm.
But it's okay, because as we've been warning as part of this EU referendum PSYOP coverage over the last couple of months, Britain's exit from the European Union has got nothing whatever to do with renegotiation. Renegotiation is nothing whatever to do with separating Britain away from Europe, rather. And in fact, what we're seeing is increased integration and further building of institutions. And what we've got here is Europe at the crossroads. This is the presidents of the central banks of France and Germany, Francois Villeroy and Jens Veldeman. And they have published this joint call to create a European treasury, a proper European treasury, initially for the Eurozone only, but in fact going much beyond that eventually. So non-Euro countries like Britain and Poland would also come under the auspices of Eurofin. So that's great news, isn't it? A European treasury to go along with the European Foreign Office, European Ministry of Defence, European Army.
Well, if you've got a European treasury, Mike, and you've got the European military in force, you don't have to worry about any referendums or political decisions because you've already taken control. Do you think that a European treasury would have to produce signed off accounts? Because, of course, the European Union to date, I think it's 19 years now, has still not produced any.
No.
No, best not to, probably.
That's it.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. I'll just say that tomorrow we've got Alex Thompson will be joining us with Eastern Approaches from the Netherlands. So we'll be having a catch up on some of the events in Europe. And a big thank you to everybody who's been emailing. I'm sorry that we can't reply to all the emails that we get. And for those of you that have got desperately important cases of your own, we are extremely sympathetic to each and every one of these cases, but we simply have not got the capacity to take on each one. But what we will continue to try and do is to get people linked together so that those of you who've experienced similar problems with organisations, for example, can at least link up and try and help one another. At the moment, we think our priority is to continue to interpret the big picture as to how the pieces are being put together in order that this country is subsumed within the European dictatorship. Because if we can understand the bigger picture, we can then deal with what is actually happening. That's about it, I think, Mike. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.